Yeah.
if you lower that dose and not CD34 select. So it's not just that it's non-myeloablative, it's the type of non-myeloablative and the actual dose of the drugs you're using.
We've spoken about a number of times, haven't we? But I think what you were saying about the different
details, it's the details. The devil is in the details.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about the different silos and neurologists and hematologists and so on, I think that's really, really key, because what we're seeing now, which we've not seen as much of before, is these different groups working together. And of course, you worked with Basil and John on the MIST trials, so we've got a very good neurologist and a very good hematologist there as well. But other than Sheffield, there have just been pockets, mostly in London, that have been carrying out HSCT for MS. So the exciting thing about StarMS is that this is now being extended across the UK. So we've got many centres that will be taking part in this. Just going to share the basics of the trial here and the inclusion criteria and so on. And so what we're going to be seeing is lots of multidisciplinary teams up and down the UK all working together, which is incredibly exciting, I think, for the MS community as a whole. So the aims of the StarMS trial are to determine whether HSCT has superior clinical efficacy compared to these high efficacy DMDs, alemtuzumab, ocrelizumab, ofatumumab, some of them I can't pronounce, and cladribine.
And also with pronunciation.
Yeah, and looking at the safety profile as well as the efficacy, and advancing understanding generally of HSCT mechanisms and so on. So we've got the criteria in front of us here. They are being very, very selective in terms of the patients that they're choosing for this. So they are looking at patients with relapsing remitting for this. They are the exclusion criteria are people that have had this previous use of these high efficacy drugs, because obviously that's what they're comparing them to. Anybody that's had HSCT previously, they're not looking at candidates with primary or secondary progressive, and they're also not looking at people that have had HSCT for more than 10 years. So they're going to be using the regimen that you used with the MIST trials.
Had MS for more than 10 years.
Yes, yeah, haven't had MS, haven't had the disease duration, certainly from symptom onset. And they, as I said, they're going to be following the MIST regimen for this. This really has come about, as we said earlier, as a result of the MIST trials. It's sort of the next logical step to make these comparisons. So, this has already started. There are a few centres that have already opened. There are more that are in the process of opening. And they're very excited about it, as you can imagine. So the publicity for this is going to start on Wednesday, which is why we're speaking to you today. So you said you've not seen this before and sort of heard the details about it. So I'm really eager to hear what your thoughts are on this. What do you expect to see?
Yeah. So again, it looks like they're following pretty similar to the design of the MIST trial, of which they were a member. The members were the University of São Paulo in Brazil, the University of Uppsala in Stockholm or Uppsala, Sweden, Sheffield, and then, of course, myself at Northwestern University in America. So it seems like it's kind of an extension that may be a little more liberal on entry criteria, with just one relapse in the last year, despite a prior DMT. I did that for second or third generation. For first generation interferon or Copaxone, you had to have 2 relapses in the first year. But that's probably the only really subtle difference I notice in enrollment criteria. Again, center experience is going to be important. So it boils down to center experience, the conditioning regimen, and patient selection. And of course, I want them to get the same results to see this go forward. but whatever it shows is what it's going to show. And, you know, it has to be analyzed in those terms. This treatment, however, is labor intense, and you need an experienced person at the bedside taking them through it. The reason that this has been held back in the field, in medicine in general, is because someone can die of a transplant. You can never make that death zero. Even myself, who sat at the bedside of 511 patients with MS going through transplant, and over 1,400 patients in total with autoimmune diseases, you know, of the 511, we did have a patient die unexpected. It was Legionella in the water supply of the hospital that was outside of our knowledge, or you know, we weren't involved in surveillance of the hospital water supply. So things like that can happen, and it really requires someone dedicated to this, even though this is non-myeloablative and a safer regimen than the Beam ATG regimen that's myeloablative being used by some. So that's kind of the caveat: dedication, experience, being there, not rotating teams, but someone who owns that patient going through that transplant.
Exactly.
That patient will do better. You have to own them. It can't be a rotating service and you're not there. That's probably why, one of the reasons why our morbidity was so low, but it requires investment in doing this. So I'm glad to see this expanding. I've spent a lot of time teaching. I just came back from Abu Dhabi, where I taught them how to do it, and they just did their first patient successfully. So, you know, I'm glad to see this expand around the world, and for more studies to occur, as well as, I think, given all the phase 1, phase 2 data and the randomized trial I did, I think this can be done now as just a standard of care. But in the field of transplant, that needs to always be reported. So in any event, you know, I'm hopeful for them, but the details are important, and I don't know the details. That's entirely within their domain.
Yes.